March 18, 1943, Berlin, Reich Air Ministry, Wilhelmstrasse. The room smells of cigarette smoke, damp wool coats, and overheated radiators. Snowmelt drips from boots lined neatly against the wall, pooling on the tiled floor. At the center of the table, beneath a hanging lamp, a single folder lies open, its pages stamped Geheime Reichssache, secret state matter. Oberst-Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Müller, Luftwaffe Intelligence, runs a finger down a typed paragraph and stops. He reads it again, then a third time. Across from him, a junior analyst shifts uncomfortably, aware that something has gone wrong without knowing exactly what. The silence stretches. Somewhere in the building, a typewriter rattles. Outside, the low hum of Berlin traffic carries on, oblivious. Müller finally speaks. His voice is flat. Read this sentence out loud. The analyst clears his throat. Willow Run Aircraft Plant, Michigan. Estimated output, 1 consolidated B-24 Liberator heavy bomber every 63 minutes. A chair scrapes the floor. Someone exhales sharply. Another officer lets out a quiet, involuntary laugh, then stops when no one else joins him. That's impossible, says Major Ernst Vogel, tapping ash into an overflowing tray. A heavy bomber requires weeks, engines alone. Müller raises a hand. This is the third independent report. Satellite reconnaissance does not exist yet. What German intelligence has instead are shipping manifests, aerial photographs taken by commercial flights before the war, intercepted production contracts, and the testimony of neutral observers, Swedish engineers, Swiss businessmen, even Axis diplomats who had visited the United States before Pearl Harbor. None of them agree on much, except this. Willow Run is real, and it is producing aircraft faster than Germany produces fighters. Müller closes the folder slowly, as if the numbers inside might escape. 5,000 miles away, Ypsilanti Township, Michigan. The factory does not roar, it breathes. A low, continuous thunder rolls through the building as steel presses slam down, rivet guns chatter, and overhead cranes glide on rails like silent predators. The Willow Run plant stretches so far that the far end disappears into haze, a mile-long corridor of motion, light, and noise. At 0600 hours, a siren sounds. Shift change. 10,000 workers stream in as 10,000 stream out, barely breaking the rhythm. On line 1, a B-24's bare aluminum fuselage inches forward on wheeled cradles. The aircraft has no personality yet, no nose art, no scars, but it already has a serial number. It already exists on paper as a combat loss or a victory. A woman named Eleanor Watkins, age 26, adjusts her gloves and steps forward as the fuselage stops precisely where it should. She does not look up. She does not need to. 6 rivets, same spot, same motion, every 57 seconds. She has never seen Europe. She has never seen a bomber fly in combat, but her hands know the shape of war. Above her, engines arrive not from workshops, but from another moving line, fully assembled Pratt & Whitney R-1830s, delivered as if by conveyor belt magic. They do not pause. They are mounted, wired, tested, and passed forward without ceremony. There is no applause, no speeches, only momentum. At Willow Run, a bomber is not built, it is flowed. Back in Berlin, Müller stands at a tall window overlooking Wilhelmstrasse. He watches a column of Luftwaffe cadets march past, boots striking pavement in perfect unison, precision, discipline, order. The Reich understands these things. What it does not understand, what this report threatens to expose, is scale. Germany builds aircraft like precision instruments, skilled labor, master craftsmen, long hours bent over jigs and frames. America builds aircraft like refrigerators. Müller flips through the photographs again. The Willow Run roof alone covers more ground than many German towns. The assembly line bends, not because of inefficiency, but because the curvature of the earth and human walking limits made straight lines impractical at that length. He stops at one image. Workers eating lunch next to the aircraft because stopping the line would waste minutes. Another shows a completed B-24 rolling out the far end of the plant, sunlight flashing off its wings. Timestamp, 12:41 p.m. The next photo shows another bomber in the same position. Timestamp, 1:44 p.m. 63 minutes. Mueller does the calculation in his head, then again on paper. He hates both answers. If these numbers are correct, and all signs suggest they are, then destruction is no longer the metric that matters. Replacement is. At Willow Run, a foreman checks his watch. The line hesitates for just a moment, 30 seconds, while a misaligned panel is corrected, then surges forward again. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a U-boat commander calculates how many bombers he can shoot down with the fuel he has left. Somewhere over Germany, a flak battery tracks a formation that seems larger than the last one. And in Berlin, Oberst-Lieutenant Mueller returns to the table, places both hands on the folder, and speaks quietly to the room. "This is not a factory," he says. "It is a weapon." The men around him understand the implication, even if they refuse to say it out loud. You can defeat an army. You can outfight an air force, but you cannot bomb an equation once it starts adding itself up. June 1st, 1941, Dearborn, Michigan, Ford Motor Company Engineering Division. Months before the first B-24 ever rolls off the Willow Run line, Edsel Ford stands over a table covered in blueprints. He is not wearing a suit jacket. The sleeves of his white shirt are rolled up, his tie loosened. Around him, engineers argue, not about aircraft design, but about movement. How long does it take a man to walk from Station A to Station B? Too long, someone answers. Then move the man, Edsel replies, or better yet, move the aircraft to him. This is the core idea that terrifies German intelligence later, though they won't fully grasp it yet. Willow Run is not an aircraft plant designed by aviators. It is a car factory philosophy applied to war. The B-24 Liberator is a nightmare to build by traditional standards, more complex than the B-17, longer wings, a high-mounted Davis wing that demands precision, 4 engines, thousands of rivets, miles of wiring. European factories rely on skilled craftsmen who know the aircraft. Willow Run assumes the opposite. It assumes the worker knows nothing and designs the factory so that ignorance doesn't matter. Each job is broken down into motions that can be learned in days. Jigs and fixtures force parts into alignment. Tools are preset. Errors are engineered out of the process before a human ever touches metal. At full operation, the plant will employ more than 42,000 workers, many of whom have never worked in manufacturing before. Farm boys, school teachers, housewives, retirees, and they will outperform the most experienced aircraft builders in the world. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. When the news reaches Willow Run, production stops for exactly 1 hour. Men gather around radios, women cry, supervisors say nothing. Then the siren sounds again. Work resumes. From that day forward, Willow Run is no longer an experiment, it is a countdown. Spring 1941, Berlin, Luftwaffe High Command briefing room. Major Vogel stands beside a chalkboard filled with figures. He underlines the final total twice. American bomber losses over Germany last month, he says, exceeded previous estimates. A general nods. Good. Vogel swallows. They also exceeded American production capacity estimates, and yet total operational bomber strength increased. Murmurs ripple through the room. Vogel gestures to the board. We believed we were winning the exchange. We are not. Mueller sits in the back, silent. He already knows why. Because somewhere in Michigan, the line never stops. At Willow Run, the concept of night barely exists. Lights burn 24 hours a day. The plant has its own fire department, medical clinics, cafeterias, rail spurs, and internal roads. A B-24 enters the factory as raw aluminum sheets and steel tubing. It exits with guns mounted, not test-fitted, not partially complete, armed, fueled, ready. On the far end of the line, Army Air Forces crews climb aboard aircraft they did not watch being built. There is no ceremony, no christening. The bomber taxis out, lifts off, and disappears towards training fields. Within weeks, it will be over Europe. Within months, it may be scrap metal or a photograph in a German intelligence file. One afternoon, a German military attaché stationed in a neutral country receives an invitation to tour an American industrial facility. He assumes it is propaganda. He accepts anyway. When he later submits his report, it is unusually short. Observed mass production techniques applied to heavy bombers, output beyond rational military planning models, psychological effect on enemy personnel likely decisive. The phrase likely decisive is underlined by someone in Berlin, then crossed out, then underlined again. Back at Willow Run, Eleanor Watkins finishes her shift. Her hands ache, her ears ring. October 14th, 1943. 26,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. The sky is filled with silver. B-17s and B-24s stretch from horizon to horizon, contrails weaving into a white scar across the blue. Inside a B-24 Liberator named Lucky Lady 2, the interphone crackles with clipped voices and static. Bandits, 3 o'clock high. Lieutenant James Holloway, co-pilot, tightens his grip on the yoke. He has flown this route before. He knows the flak corridors. He knows the odds. What he does not know is where his airplane was built. He does not know about Eleanor Watkins. He does not know about Willow Run's mile-long line. He does not know that the aircraft vibrating beneath his boots rolled out of a Michigan factory just 11 weeks earlier. All he knows is that there are more bombers today than there were last month. And that matters. Below them, German radar stations light up. Controllers vector fighters with practiced efficiency. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s claw into the sky, engines screaming. Pilots already calculating ammunition and fuel. Hauptmann Rudolf Neumann spots the formation and feels his stomach drop. Too many. The formations overlap now. Where once there were gaps, there is solid wall. He dives, fires, sees a Liberator shudder and fall out of formation, trailing smoke. 1 kill. By the time he lands, intelligence officers tell him the day's bomber losses were severe. Then they tell him something else. Tomorrow's raid will be larger. Berlin. Luftwaffe Operations Analysis Unit. Chalk dust coats the fingers of analysts who no longer argue about tactics. They argue about math. Every German fighter pilot represents years of training, scarce fuel, irreplaceable experience. Every lost aircraft requires skilled labor Germany can no longer spare. American bombers, by contrast, arrive in quantities that defy attrition models. Mueller watches as a young officer erases a column of optimistic projections and replaces it with a flatter, more brutal line. No matter how many we destroy, the officer says quietly, they replace more. Mueller nods, and faster. At Willow Run, production accelerates even as Europe burns. Engineers shave seconds off processes that were already efficient. A redesigned tool saves 12 seconds per installation. A revised walkway reduces fatigue and errors. The gains are small. The consequences are enormous. By mid-1944, Willow Run produces 1 B-24 every 55 minutes. The factory no longer announces records. It simply breaks them. German intelligence intercepts another report. Estimated total American aircraft production for 1944 exceeds 96,000 planes. Someone writes in the margin, unbelievable. Someone else writes beneath it, verified. In occupied Europe, civilians look up and see skies that no longer empty between raids. In Germany, cities rebuild at night only to be destroyed again day by day. The pilots fighting the bombers begin to understand something their leaders already know but cannot say publicly. This is no longer a contest of bravery. It is an industrial execution. Hauptmann Neumann survives the winter. Many of his friends do not. He writes home less often now. When he does, he avoids details. In his private journal, he is more honest. They come back no matter how many we kill. It is as if the enemy has discovered a way to manufacture time itself. At Willow Run, Eleanor Watkins promoted to line supervisor. She trains new workers, teenagers, middle-aged men, women who had never touched a rivet gun before 1942. She tells them the same thing every time. Don't think about the whole airplane, just your part. They listen. The airplanes keep coming. In Berlin, Mueller attends his last briefing on American production. No one debates the figures anymore. The only question left is how long Germany can last before the numbers finish their work. Mueller looks around the room at men who once planned victories and now calculate delays. He realizes something then, with absolute clarity. The war was not lost in the skies over Germany. It was lost on a factory floor in Michigan, long before the first bomb ever fell. And there is nothing left to stop it.
January 11th, 1944. Berlin. Reich Chancellery Underground Conference Room. The air raid sirens have stopped, but no one trusts the silence. Dust still hangs in the air from a near miss 2 streets away. The men gathered around the table sit in their coats. The building above them has lost several windows. On the table lies a single chart. Not a speech, not a morale report. A curve. It rises gently at first, then sharply, then almost vertically. At the bottom, a label. United States Heavy Bomber Output. At the top, a date. Projected mid-1944. General Hans Yashonik studies it without blinking. This assumes uninterrupted production, he says. It does not assume uninterrupted, Mueller replies. It demonstrates it. He gestures to another sheet, photographs taken months apart. The same factory, the same roof, the same line. Bomb damage, 0. No amount of bombing can reach it, Mueller continues. Even if we could, it would not matter. They would rebuild faster than we can plan the next raid. No one contradicts him. The argument is over. Ypsilanti Township, Michigan. Winter coats hang from lockers. Steam rises from workers' breath as doors open and close. Snow piles up outside the plant, but inside, summer never ends. The line moves. A B-24's wings are attached. Another receives wiring. Another has its engines tested. Another rolls out into the cold air, its tires crunching on frozen ground. 55 minutes later, the next one follows. Willow Run has become something more than a factory. It is a clock. In Germany, the consequences appear everywhere. Fuel shortages ground fighters that could still fly. Training hours are cut. Experienced pilots are sent up with barely trained wingmen because numbers demand it. They are no longer trying to win. They are trying to slow the inevitable. Hauptmann Neumann flies one of his last missions in February 1944. His engine stutters on landing. There will be no replacement aircraft. He is reassigned to a training unit that has no fuel. When asked about American bombers, he answers honestly. They are endless. At Willow Run, Eleanor Watkins watches a group of visitors, congressmen, officers, and journalists walk along the elevated platform overlooking the line. One of them asks how long it takes to build a bomber. She answers without hesitation, about an hour. He laughs, assuming it's a joke. She doesn't. Spring 1944. German Intelligence Summary Report. The language is clinical, almost resigned. American industrial production has reached levels that render traditional attrition models obsolete. Continued resistance will not alter material imbalance. Strategic outcome now determined by time, not tactics. The word defeat never appears. It doesn't need to. On June 6, 1944, thousands of aircraft fill the skies over Normandy. Many of them were born at Willow Run. They fly cover. They drop bombs. They transport men and supplies. They do not stop. Back in Berlin, Mueller stands once more at a window, this time boarded up with wood. He listens to distant explosions and thinks about Michigan, about a building so large it bent to the horizon.
about people who had never seen him, never hated him, never even knew his name, yet had decided the war by showing up to work every day and never letting the line stop. He understands now what truly shocked German intelligence. It was not the speed, it was the certainty. Once America decided to build something, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The only variable left was how long it would take everyone else to realize it. And by the time they did, it was already over. August 1944, Mersburg, Germany. The oil refinery burns again. Black smoke coils into the sky as bombers turn west, their formations still intact despite flak bursts peppering the air. On the ground, emergency crews barely wait for the all-clear before moving in, knowing they will be chased off by another raid within days. This is the rhythm now. Not attack and recovery, attack and replacement. In Berlin, the Luftwaffe's situation reports grow shorter. There are fewer pilots to write them. Muller reads one final production intercept before filing it away. Willow Run's numbers have peaked. Not because of failure, but because the plant has reached maximum efficiency. At this point, increasing output further would strain transportation, not manufacturing. It is the most damning statistic of all. Willow Run Aircraft Plant. A banner hangs near the entrance, 1,000 Liberators and counting. Workers walk past it without stopping. Milestones no longer impress anyone. Eleanor Watkins supervises 2 lines now. She has learned to read the hum of the plant the way a sailor reads the sea. A change in pitch means something is wrong. A pause means trouble. Today, there is no pause. German intelligence submits its final comprehensive assessment of American war industry in September 1944. It will not be widely circulated. It does not need to be. The conclusion is unavoidable. The United States has converted civilian time into military force at a rate unmatched in history. Destruction of enemy materiel no longer produces strategic advantage. In simpler terms, they can lose faster than we can kill. On the front lines, German soldiers notice the same truth without reading reports. American units arrive fully equipped. Trucks replace trucks. Tanks replace tanks. Aircraft appear overhead even after heavy losses. For every weapon destroyed, 2 more seem to arrive. Hauptmann Neumann surrenders in April 1945. He is thin, exhausted, alive. At the POW camp, he is given food, coffee, and a blanket. He watches American transport aircraft land nearby, dozens of them. He asks a guard where they come from. The guard shrugs. Factories back home. Neumann thinks of the skies over Germany, once contested, now owned. He finally understands that the decisive battles were never fought where he flew. They were fought in places like Michigan. Willow Run, 1945. The war in Europe ends. The line slows for the first time in years. The silence is unsettling. Workers stand awkwardly, unsure what comes next. Some cheer, some cry, some simply listen to the absence of noise. Eleanor Watkins removes her gloves and sets them down. Her hands are scarred, strong. She looks down the length of the factory, at the place where aluminum became destiny. She will never see Berlin, but Berlin felt her work. Post-war German military archives. Muller's reports are declassified years later. Historians study the moment when German intelligence accepted the inevitable. They point not to a battle, not to a general, not to a single bomb. They point to a factory that built bombers faster than fighters could be built or destroyed. The Second World War did not end because one side ran out of courage. It ended because one side ran out of time, and time, in the end, was manufactured.